derailment making national headlines. 22 train cars are off the tracks, some even catching fire.
This happened just outside the town of Raymond. That's about a 2-hour drive west of the Twin Cities metro area. Residents were evacuated early this morning. They are back home now. And we have team coverage for you on this derailment, the impact on the community, the recent history of incidents as well. Let's start with Brett Hofflin. Brett is live in Raymond right now. Brett, you have a look at what we're learning about the situation here.
Yeah, that's right, Leah. The train derailment happened just behind me, and at this hour, there are still some of the cars that are still burning. I want to give you a closer look. My photographer, Kevin, will zoom in a little bit. We're told that it is ethanol and corn syrup that was on the cars that derailed. That's why we're still seeing the flames as the ethanol is burning off. Still a heavy police and emergency response at this hour with the BNSF, just telling me that they're waiting for the NTSB to arrive, and when they arrive, that's when they can start to take away some of those cars. We know that around 1 o'clock this morning, 22 cars derailed on the western edge of this roughly 800 resident town. Those train cars were headed northbound out of Sioux City carrying the ethanol and corn syrup. Now, this is a view from Chopper 5 as emergency crews responded to the fiery scene. Thankfully, no injuries or fatalities were reported from the derailment. We know the cleanup could take days, and with that comes help from the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency to monitor the air and the water. And tonight, the BNSF is taking full responsibility for this, saying that safety is the top priority for the community. The president and CEO of BNSF is also in town, and this is what she had to say regarding train derailments all across the country.
Certainly, I think we're hearing more about derailments in the wake of East Palestine. 99.99% of all hazardous commodities get moved to destination without incident. So, whether or not you're hearing more about them, I wouldn't really necessarily weigh in. I can tell you what the statistics are, and that is 99.99% of all hazardous commodities get to destination without incident. So we are very safe.
Now, again, what you're seeing behind me is a lot of these trucks getting in place, preparing for when the NTSB arrives. That is when they can start that tear-down process of removing some of these cars. They, again, have to wait until all the flames go out. This is a process that could take days, and the investigation into how and why this all happened is ongoing. Live in Raymond, Brett Hofflin, 5 Eyewitness News.
Yeah, it's quite the scene out there, Brett. Thank you. So, as we mentioned earlier, evacuation orders have been lifted. Now, Eric Chaloux is in the neighboring community of Princeburg, showing us how this emergency has impacted everyone in the community.
And Eric, you spoke with some of the evacuated people who took shelter there earlier today.
Yeah, this is where the governor spoke, and along with emergency management officials, as well as at the shelter where these folks were brought. Now, the Kaneohe County Sheriff said earlier overnight, deputies and first responders pounding on doors, about 250 homes, getting folks to come out due to that evacuation order. Some of the residents went to a shelter and a school down the street from where I'm at. Others came here to the church we're out in front of tonight. It's where this small community gathered to help one another out. Emergency officials activated phone alerts early Thursday morning to residents after the train derailment in Raymond.
I've never gotten one of those phone alerts before, so what is this? Train derailment? Oh, come on.
Terry Wachter says she was concerned at first, wondering what could have spilled.
I was more concerned if it would be something that would get in the air.
She was evacuated from her senior living center to a shelter in nearby Princeburg in the early morning hours.
I've never seen so many emergency vehicles in one place except for on TV.
Volunteers brought food and water to the Unity Christian Reformed Church to help evacuees as folks waited to see when they could return home.
This is really the nature of small communities in rural Minnesota. We help people when they need help, and so we're glad to be a service of here and happy any way that we can help.
You want chicken rice? Tim Miller came to volunteer at the church to help his neighbors in need.
Living up to what God has called us, each and every one of us, to do, to serve our neighbor.
We got the kids up out of bed and grabbed what we could and then headed south.
The uncertainty of the moment, James Miller says, was eased by seeing the community come together to help those from Raymond.
It's nice, but it's one of the reasons why we're here, and it's because it is that strong community.
As for Terry, by midday she was able to go home, hoping to never have a night like last ever again.
Let's have no more.
And the last of those evacuated residents leaving earlier this afternoon from the church shelter here. Now, the Ojai County Sheriff says there's no impact to the groundwater. The railroad has also been monitoring the air. No concerns, they say, detected there. Now, Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad does have a hotline number set up for those residents and businesses that are impacted. You can see the number on the bottom of your screen there. It's 866-243-4784. And that'll get you right to the railroad. We've seen some folks actually coming here to the church where the railroad is handling some of those residents' claims. Again, this community rallying around one another after that train derailed. For Live in Princeton, Eric Schuler, Eyewitness News.
Eric, thank you. You know, this derailment is really highlighting how a single mishap on the rails can really have a widespread effect.
And even though government data shows that derailments have declined in recent years overall, there were still more than 1,000 of them last year. Our Lindsey Brown is here with us in studio. Lindsey, you've got to look at recent incidents that are now spurring calls for more safety.
Absolutely, and this accident is getting a lot of attention because, of course, railroad safety has been in the spotlight nationally ever since that fiery derailment of a Norfolk Southern train near East Palestine, Ohio, back on February 3rd. Roughly half of that town of about 5,000 people near the Pennsylvania border had to be evacuated after officials decided to release and burn toxic chemicals. Although state and federal officials insist no harmful chemicals have been found in the air or water, Ohio residents remain uneasy. There have been several other high-profile derailments involving hazardous chemicals since then. A train carrying more than 30,000 gallons of propane fuel derailed in Florida March 1st. And just Sunday, a Canadian Pacific train derailed in rural North Dakota, spilling hazardous materials. Here at home, federal data shows from 2012 to 2022, Minnesota has had 185 train derailments. In 2021, 2 Union Pacific cars spilled hydrochloric acid when a train derailed off the edge of Goose Lake near Albert Lea. In 2016, nearly 700 people in the city of Ellendale had to be evacuated after cars filled with liquid petroleum were punctured. Now, in the wake of last month's derailment in Ohio, the major freight rail companies have said they plan to add about 1,000 more trackside detectors nationwide to help spot equipment problems. But federal regulators and lawmakers are calling for additional reforms. Today, Senator Amy Klobuchar discussed a bill she supports.
What the bill says is, number one, better safety standards. Number two, we should have 2 people on each train, especially when they're over a mile long. And number 3, there should be higher civil penalties when there is a derailment.
And this is a big one. Another proposal would require rail companies to notify state emergency officials if they're transporting hazardous materials. Of course, a lot of Americans hearing about this and thinking this has been happening all along, but no, it's still developing. Paul.
Okay, yes, agreed. Thank you, Lindsay. This is a developing situation. 5 Eyewitness News is your source for updates on what's happening in and around Raymond. You're going to find the latest right here on air and online at KSTP.com.
In other developments,